This is the James Crepea Show.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
Oregonian columnist James Crepea.
I had some crackpot dynamite reporter at the first press conference ask me how in the heck we're going to possibly throw the ball when they keep a lid on their covers and who's the best pass rusher you've ever played against.
We're not the favorites. We're the other guys.
KORE 1050 and 95.7. Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
Hit the lights and lock the doors. Welcome, everybody, to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene on this Wednesday, September the 4th. I am James Crepea, the Oregon Ducks beat reporter for the Oregonian and Oregon Live, where you can read and follow all my work covering the Ducks on a day-to-day basis and plenty more. Today's guest will be Ryan Wood of the Green Bay Press-Gazette. Why are we talking to him, you might ask? Well, because the Packers and the Bears open the NFL season on Thursday night. And though he might have been able to squeeze us in just before kickoff, it might have been a little bit of a tall task to try to ask him to do that. So we said, no, let's do it today and make it easy. So we'll talk with Ryan at the top of the hour at 5 o'clock. And later in the 5 o'clock hour, we'll have on Stephen Tsai, who works for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, covering the Warriors. And we will see and get an update from him, as obviously Hawaii still coming off and riding high, I'm sure, a win over Arizona in week 0 of the college football season, and obviously hosting Oregon State in what is going to be a rather big game here on Saturday, really for both teams, to be quite honest, because at this point, at this time and day, and where the state of these two programs are, Hawaii is unequivocally better. They already have a Pac-12 win, though they're obviously not in the conference. And they were a winning team last year. And Oregon State is coming off being lit up by yet another team. Yes, their offense did pretty well, but their defense didn't stop anything. So we will talk with Stephen at 5:30 about Hawaii and the offense and the juggernaut that was in the shootout with Arizona in week 0. And what it would mean to Hawaii to possibly pick up, and likely pick up, frankly, if you go by the odds makers, a second Pac-12 win in as many games would be pretty big. But we start today, as usual, with the Ducks, and putting a bow first on the clock issue and all the discussion about that on Saturday's game, and clock management, timeout management, etc. Putting this to rest now and ending it. Revisited it after yesterday's show, wrote it this morning. You can check out again on OregonLive.com, and went back and watched again parts of the fourth quarter, really through and through, of each of Oregon's drives in particular. And yes, there were the approximately 15 seconds. If you just go on the last drive, approximately 15 total seconds that Oregon left on the clock that they could have wound the play clock down. They snapped the ball with, Fowler even says on the telecast, 12 seconds. Sometimes there's an ever so slight delay between what's on the telecast and what's in the building. Ever so slight. Usually not. So somewhere between 11 and 12. So let's conservatively call that 10 seconds that they could have wound down, if you don't want to literally take it down to 1. Okay. Then on the following two plays, there's right around 5 seconds, and the other one's between 4 and 5, let's call it 4 seconds. So 10 with a combination of 3 and 2, and you get to 15. That's at minimum. I went back and watched the earlier drive, earlier in the quarter. And you say, well, why? At some point, at that point, you might as well go to the beginning of the third. No. The whole quarter matters. In particular, once Auburn had got within a 1-point game, and it's 21-20. So the drive starting at 9:48, possession of the ball, 9:48, 1-point football game, matters. And looking back at that drive prior to the back-to-back timeouts at 5:34 on 4th and 1 from the Auburn 41. In the plays leading up to that, Oregon left time on the play clock each time there as well. They snapped the ball with 14, 14, and 7. So that's, let's call it 12, and 12 is 24, and 5 approximately, and that's 29, maybe 30. So that's including that drive where, by the way, just to tell you how not unrealistic it is to think in those terms. First off, again, you can absolutely drive the field and take, I'm not going to say the full 948. That's really outlandish, okay? But if you want to assemble a just methodical, pulverizing drive, starting from your own 25-yard line with 9:48 in a one-score game, and ultimately score, you can take dang near the full 9:48. I'm not going to say for sure because, again, you might have one big play that takes up 20, 25, 30 yards, and all of a sudden taking up 9 minutes is not realistically possible. But point is, you can definitely take 6+ for sure. For sure. But the point is the 3 plays leading into the back-to-back timeouts, you even hear them on the telecast reference, oh, well, Oregon's just looking to wind the clock here and take time off the clock. Well, no, they weren't by what they were doing. And you can understand and appreciate teams that play with a bit of tempo offense, sticking true to their guns and sticking true to who they are. There's something to be said for that. But there are moments where you must compromise certain philosophical approaches and win the game. Do everything you can to win the game. It's not suddenly throwing out your entire offense or defense. It's not suddenly doing something radically different. It's talking about simply using the clock to the full advantage that you can. And in those moments, Oregon did not do that. Both in the literal last drive with 4.5 minutes to go, and in the drive prior to the back-to-back timeouts, where again, it is 21-20. They have the ball. Auburn is not thinking about using timeouts that early. And you could say, well, if they're not thinking about taking timeouts, then why think about wheeling the clock? Because you have the lead. You have the lead. In a one-score game, you have the ball and the lead in the fourth quarter. Therefore, you must think about the clock. You must. At all times. Outside of maintaining possession and hopefully eventually scoring at the end of said possession, the clock is the only thing that matters. You must think of that all the time. So going back and watching it again, you can say at minimum 15 seconds if you don't want to look at the earlier drive, as I did. Or if you do, you're talking about approximately 45 seconds that was left on the clock. Now, does it matter? As I literally say in the headline of the story, here's how much time is left and why it may or may not have mattered at all. You can't simply subtract the time from the time that Auburn took possession. You can't, because they exchanged possessions here. Auburn had the 3-and-out drive that started at 5:30. Oregon got the ball back with 4:31. Auburn got it with 2:14. You can't simply say, oh, well, 15 seconds left, so 2:14. They got it with 1:59. No, you can't. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. Because for one, you don't know. Auburn might have then decided to take its first timeout after after first down on defense prior to second, as opposed to after second prior to third. You don't know that for sure. That's number one. Number two, if they had bled it on the earlier drive, then they're really taking it after first down on the subsequent drive, assuming all else holds true. Because now you just took 45 seconds off on everything thereafter. So then they're really pressed. They may very well take it on after first down, maybe or maybe not, because, again, they still had a field goal kicker, and they only needed a field goal that particular time, and they probably wanted to save it for offense, to be perfectly honest with you. But to look into the final drive and then say, all right, here's what the maximum amount of time that they left in the fourth quarter that they had control over, 45 seconds. That's the maximum. Okay. Would it have mattered to the final drive? You have no idea of knowing. And that's, like, as I said yesterday, that's some of the fun of sport, is the discussion, debate, and argument that comes along when these matters arise. But you just don't know. All you do know is that Auburn would have had less time. That's for sure. How much and what that would have impacted by way of play calling and strategy to Gus Malzahn as he's trying to drive the field a bit. And mind you, Auburn took the ball over at their own 40. It wasn't like they took over at the 20 or 25. Maimone had a great night punting except for the last kick, which only went 29 yards. So Auburn started in pretty dang good field position to start. Realistically speaking, and I'm not exaggerating, they only needed to gain 20 yards to be in this field goal kicker's range. They only needed to get to the Oregon 40. And that's where they were on the pass. Prior to the touchdown pass, they're at the 39. So on 3rd and 10, they threw for 13 yards. If it's incomplete and it's 4th and 10, they're taking the field goal right there. And you could say, well, 56-yarder. Yeah, 56-yarder indoors. And Anders Carlson, though he missed the kick earlier in the game, they feel real confident about his range. Now, could he have missed? Absolutely could have missed. It's 56 yards. Nothing's a guarantee. But he could have made it, too. So we could be arguing all of this for absolutely nothing. It's just to state the case that the criticism of Mario Cristobal regarding time usage, some have gone so far as to say it is a major, major Achilles heel and a major question against his in-game coaching relative to the program building and everything else that he's doing here at Oregon. That's one view. There are other views that tell you none of it means anything because you have no idea about anything. That's the other extreme. In a totally neutral approach, this is the maximum amount of time that could have been left, 45 seconds. Would it have made an impact? You can make your own decision in your own head what they would have done. All I know for sure is it absolutely would have impacted how much time Auburn would have had to operate. What Auburn would have done thereafter, you and I have no idea. And I know them pretty well. You have no idea. They were looking to free up Seth Williams a lot. They finally got him at the end. Would they have pushed the issue that much earlier in the drive? Would they have only been looking for deep passes and never run the ball? Who knows? You can go on and on and on. But that's why I say this is putting a bow on the topic as a whole. I went back, I watched it, I wrote it up this morning. Check out the story on OregonLive.com if it will help you at all. Also, last night had one regarding the strategy and why Oregon basically got enticed into, why Justin Herbert got enticed into throwing shorter throws on RPOs rather than either running or, unfortunately for Oregon's purposes, not taking advantage of some more vertical passing, with comments from Arroyo, Cristobal. And these are some pretty heavy football-related in-game, inside-the-line terminology in this story. So if you have a particular football mind, if you're a coach, a former player, any of that, you really understand and appreciate what they're saying. Because Jake Hansen's talking about what the Auburn defense did relative to the first half, how there weren't major schematic changes, but there were more flow-through from the backside linebacker, stuff that, believe me, you're not hearing on the telecast, okay? Stuff that the average person, it's just going to get lost. But I try, in doing these stories, to translate between the layman and the average fan and the person who appreciates following the team and the insider and the player and the coach who wants to talk in their lingo and terminology and advanced stuff, and try to express it both ways, express from the fans' perspective, hey, these are the questions that people want answered, and from the coaches and players' perspective, this is the inside reasoning behind things. Now let me try and translate it back the other way. try to do that. It's part of the fun of the job. So you can check out those stories and more, as they say, on OregonLive.com. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. And with today's updates on the Ducks, we start on the injury front. Obviously, the big personnel to follow are literally the big personnel, that being Juwan Johnson and Cam McCormick. We spoke with Mario Cristobal after today's practice, and here's what he had to say regarding those two.
Am I ready to say they're going to be available this weekend? I can't say that yet. I feel like it's a toss-up more than it was. Juwan's deal last week, it happened so late in the week. It was like, whoa. Cam's was legitimately, hey, can this stand? Cam actually looked good in warm-ups, which makes you think, man, he's right on the verge. But due to the sensitivity of that area, it sometimes, I guess, takes a little bit longer.
So there you have it, a toss-up, game-time decision kind of deal for Juwan Johnson and Cam McCormick, who obviously both missed the season opener. Juwan with a leg muscle issue. Don't know if that's high up. Don't know if that's calf. Don't know if that's hamstring. Leg, muscular in nature. And McCormick, this is still the same high ankle sprain that has been plaguing him since the start of, even before the start of fall camp. Obviously quite discouraging that it has now lasted into games for him. Now, McCormick, as Mario noted, did go through pregame warm-ups. We saw him in full uniform, pads, the whole to-do. How much of that was a little bit of gamesmanship with Auburn out there watching as well, because they also sent Anthony Schwartz out there? Maybe a little bit. But ultimately, I don't think you really mess around at that point. I think you're really trying to see, can this guy go? And, yeah, he did look pretty good in warm-ups. Now, again, he's not taking contact, but he looked pretty good. So does that mean that he's that much closer? I'm not a doctor, man. I don't know. Could he be? I certainly hope so. This is someone who has now been off the field outside of spring practice and the spring game for a year. He got hurt in last year's season opener, so he has been out for a full year of games at this point. You know that he is chomping at the bit to get back. That said, for Juwan, you would say, hey, given the opponents here, you don't want to rush either one of these guys back if they're not ready. You need them back for Pac-12 play. That's what matters. On the other hand, again, Cam McCormick has already missed a year, and you need to get him back into the rhythm of playing games. It's been quite a while since he played a full college football game. You need him, but you also need him to get used to that before maybe you play Stanford. There's a big argument to be made, as long as he's ready to return, that you would do that. With Juwan Johnson, hey, it's more valuable in the long term, more important in the long term, but at the same time, he's a graduate transfer. It's not like you're thinking about the longer term outside of this season. So for him in particular, it really is no time like the present. You are thinking about simply the remaining 11 regular season games and whatever the future has to hold thereafter. That's it. So the soonest possible time that he can come back, whether it is this week or whether it is, frankly, next week against Montana, it's about getting him on the field in real games against real opponents. You need to get both of them back in that spot. I'd say really both with the same sense of urgency, to be quite honest, as soon as possible, whenever that might be. Do the Ducks need them to beat Nevada or Montana? No. But what they need them to do is to be as close to fully healthy and game ready by the time the Stanford game arrives. And you're talking about a game that's only 2.5 weeks away. So that is rather important that one or both get back as soon as possible. If it's this Saturday, hey, that would be quite the treat for the folks who make the trip to Autzen to see a game with Nevada at 4:30 in the afternoon in what will surely be a probably lopsided contest by the end of it. Certainly most Oregon fans are hoping, I would imagine. And again, based on the odds makers, a roughly 24-point line. So should probably be a game well in hand. But nevertheless, you very much want to see those two guys out there as soon as possible, hopefully this Saturday. Other news that we got from Mario today. John Neal, former secondary coach for the Ducks, has indeed finally officially rejoined the program. So, as we asked Mario on this program about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago?
Yeah, it's about 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
At that time, it was not finalized. And sometime between then and prior to the season opener, it got finalized. So, John Neal is back. He is an analyst, a defensive analyst, and obviously that's always a mysterious role for many people as far as what exactly that all entails. But usually speaking, folks, what analysts generally speaking handle for most major programs is a lot of advanced scouting stuff, more so than anything. Sometimes it's advanced in-team analysis, leading into bye weeks and things like that to review internally. But generally speaking, the coaching staff pretty much has a pretty good handle on that. It's usually advanced scouting of opponents. So, and by advance, I don't mean 1 week out. I mean, these guys are, because that's all they can do. They cannot do on-the-field coaching. And on game day, they have really virtually no game day responsibilities at all. They can't, by rule, unless you are, whatever they changed that rule to a couple of years ago, within 4 years or 10 years, whatever the heck it was, of postgraduate assistant kind of timetable. And certainly John Neal does not fit that billing. So needless to say, it's advanced scouting. It's advanced scouting of teams who are several weeks down the schedule is what it is. And those are valuable roles, and they're key to have to any program because it saves everybody that much time. These guys do it all well in advance, so that way when it comes to game week, these guys, if they're traveling back on a Saturday, or even if it's a home Saturday and you got all the recruits on campus and that stuff, when they show up Sunday morning, they're going through their corrections and whatnot. But by Sunday night, everybody's moving on, and Monday, everybody's moving on. All of that in-house analysis and breaking down a film and etc., that's already done. And that's done by those analysts. So that's what John Neal will be doing now officially for the Oregon football program. Also spoke with Andy Avalos today and spoke with him a little bit about his rather extensive familiarity with Nevada, having coached at Boise State. Here's what he had to say about both the Nevada running game and went on to comment about Nevada's big comeback against Purdue.
We're trying to build off our fundamentals, and being more disciplined with our gap control and our run fits and making sure that our players feel really, really comfortable with exactly what we're doing with our front structures and where everybody's fitting. And being able to do that on a consistent basis is something we're trying to build off of. And these running backs, they're very, very physical. They are one cut downhill. They're going to run behind their pads. They're going to fall forward. They do an extremely good job coaching the running backs there.
Good to see from their freshman quarterback, and obviously their receivers made some real huge presence-of-mind moments to make that comeback happen.
Their wide receiver core has been really good for a few years now. They got length on the outside. They got speed on the inside, quick slots, guys that can run, guys that wide receivers that complement each other. The quarterback obviously did a tremendous job in leading them back. He made some really remarkable plays. He's capable of extending plays with his feet. And from watching that game, you got to say the guy, he's a gamer, right? He made some unbelievable plays. So we're going to have our hands full, and we've got to focus on our process and the things that we've got to get done, which is always for us is making sure that we're ahead in the pre-snap and winning and recognizing formations and doing a great job of communicating. They will give us some formation issues that we will have to be ready for.
Coach Cristobal mentioned wanting to get DJ Johnson a little bit more involved, and Kayvon came in that first game in a couple different packages, but not a crazy amount of snaps. I mean, do you feel like, given that you did a pretty good job last week against that Auburn team, is there much to be changed, or maybe a desire to get some of those guys a little bit more involved?
We're trying to grow, yes, sir. We're trying to grow every week. We're trying to grow every week. We're trying to grow guys' roles every week. Nothing's going to stay static around here. We're going to keep growing. And guys, the guys have an urgency. They've had urgency this week to grow. Regardless if they played well, they didn't get as much playing time. They got no playing time. Guys have had urgency to get better this week, and we have to do that. And we want to grow everybody's role throughout the course of the year because it's a long season. You know, we're going to need everybody.
So there's Avalos commenting, as I say, on the Nevada offense and some of the challenge that they may pose there. Now, just to give you an idea, just to give you some context into exactly how well Boise State played them last year, which was, even though it was a competitive game, it was quite close. Boise State, Nevada, it was 31-27. So it was quite competitive. However, for their running back, for Nevada's back, he was quite well contained. He had 9 carries for 16 yards.
Ooh.
So he, to say he bottled him up would be, may not have even been putting it quite in full enough terms. He had 9 carries for 16 yards. The following week against Hawaii, he had 18 for 126. So he pulled his average way back up. But then the following week against San Diego State, 13 for 7 yards. So Toa Taua, Nevada's running back, is certainly their bigger threat. Ran for 872 yards last season, only 16 against Andy Avalos and Boise State. As I mentioned to Andy today, on one hand, and leading into that question, was on one hand, you did a fine job. On the other hand, they know exactly what you did.
True. True.
How do you try to go about doing it again when they very much know what you like to do in trying to contain them in the first place? So that is the task that Andy Avalos has. Now, that said, he also has a top-to-bottom more talented roster than he had at Boise State, which was still quite good, as we know, because they really laid it on thick to Willie Taggart in Florida State. So, again, hey, we'll see what Andy Avalos has dialed up for the Oregon defense here on Saturday as they take on Nevada. I can assure you, you are not going to know very much about John Neal's role going forward and what he is doing. But like I say, I could tell you it's basically advanced scouting. That's more or less what those analysts do, and that's quite a bit of work. Let me not underestimate, but no coach details fully what their analysts do. That's just part of the deal. I can tell you that elsewhere, and I do mean elsewhere, what some analysts do is, for instance, say you're going into a big game in the postseason, okay, that once the officials are known to the teams, that the analysts will watch all of the games of the officials.
They'll develop a playbook on each of the officials.
And, well, what they want to know is they want to know what is considered holding or pass interference or what have you by specific officials.
And how often, how frequently do they call certain things?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, but they go back and the how often part is more just pure number. The subjective part of what is and what isn't is what analysts will go back and watch, as I say, elsewhere if you're playing in a particularly big game in the postseason. I can say from knowledge of talking to people who served as analysts at other places, that would be part of the mundane of that job. So if you think
paint dry,
if you think rewatching football games on one hand could be enjoyable or monotonous, now imagine doing it when you have no stake in the game whatsoever, other than what you're watching is you're watching the officials, and the calls is what it is. Yes, that's what those jobs may entail. So that just gives you an idea. But again, big takeaways of the day: Neal officially an analyst, Juwan Johnson, Cam McCormick toss-ups. So call it 50-50, call it game day. Game time decision, whatever you want to call it. Bottom line, unclear definitively for Saturday, but sooner the better. And Avi Avalos certainly has quite a bit of familiarity with that Nevada defense, and we will get into that more in the days ahead in the week, and I will get more into that in writing about it for the Oregonian and OregonLive.com. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. Shifting gears across the state to Oregon State as they prepare to head to Hawaii and take on the Warriors. And a Warriors team that went ahead and beat Arizona in Week 0. So a rather significant challenge for Oregon State, to say the least, in this one heading in, where they are not favored at all. And that defense could be in for a rough day against 4 and 5 wide receiver sets all game long, to say the least. If you thought Oklahoma State passed the ball a lot, Hawaii passed for 361 yards. Or excuse me, that was Arizona. They passed for 436 yards. So they throw the ball quite a bit. Again, their defense allowed 361 yards passing, but their offense, they're pretty geared towards throwing the ball, as they usually have been. Well, some of the folks up in Corvallis spoke with players this week, and here were a couple of comments from practice availabilities and whatnot with Oregon State that stood out. One, defensive coordinator Tim Tibesar spoke today, and he spoke regarding Jalen Moore, and who obviously missed the season opener, and that is your number one player on defense. He said, it would be great to have him out there. We aren't sure if he's going to be cleared to play. Obviously, the number of games he's played and the number of plays he's made, it'll be great to have a guy like him back out there. So, at this point, you could still be without your number one defensive player if you're Oregon State. Certainly not the news you want to hear. Definitely not the news you want to hear, in fact. So that would be rather disappointing if Jalen Moore misses a second straight week in a game where, once again, I cannot stress this enough, because some people will have a hard time believing this, but Oregon State is not favored in this game. Hawaii is supposed to win. If you don't have one of your better defensive players, that makes it a lot more challenging against a team that put up, as I say, over 450 yards passing. Over nearly 600 yards of offense against Arizona. And I know their defense is bad. But if you think their defense is bad, trust me, we all well know Oregon State's can make that Arizona defense look like the 85 Bears by comparison. So, needless to say, Jalen Moore getting back on the field as soon as possible will be a massive infusion of talent and playmaking ability whenever that happens. If you're an Oregon State fan, you hope that is this instant, well before anybody boards a plane to Honolulu. Elsewhere for Oregon State, Jamar Jefferson had a comment that I saw that, oh boy, in reference to, this is regard to when the offense was going 3 and out in the second quarter, 3 straight times Oregon State went 3 and out. Meanwhile, Oklahoma State was responding with touchdowns over and over. So obviously the game started to pull away early on. Bottom line, it was 10-10, and then Oklahoma State got on a little bit of a tear there in the second quarter with 3 straight touchdowns while Oregon State was going 3 and out successively. And Jamar Jefferson had to say, when they started scoring, our sidelines started to get a little bit mellow. Already?
Oof.
Already. You are less than 30 minutes into the college football season. You were in a tie game at 13:33 to go in the first half. And they scored 3 straight touchdowns. It's 31-10 with 2:02 to go, and your sideline's getting mellow already. I know that we have said over and over on this program that it is a monumental rebuild what Jonathan Smith and his staff have to do in Corvallis. But when one of your better players, maybe your best player, is talking about the sideline being mellow less than 30 minutes into the season, in what is, hey, I admit, you're going out there and not having success and the other team's racking up some points. I'm not telling you that you should be bouncing off the walls. I'm just telling you, it's still only a 3-score game. And
right.
Their defense isn't any good.
With a lot of time left.
With 32 minutes left. And by the way, Oregon State did go down and score, obviously, at the end of the first half. So at 30, so what you're telling me is that the sideline was mellow at 31-10, but meanwhile at halftime it's 31-16, and what? You're going to tell me you went in positive? You were uplifted all of a sudden? You shouldn't have been down in the first place, emotionally, that soon. You didn't know that they were going to be a challenge? Of course they were. But to me, you can't go out there and say less than 30 minutes into the season the sideline's mellow. Holy smokes. Look, I know that it is hard to stay upbeat. It is hard to stay positive when every time you're going on the field, you're getting your teeth kicked in. I understand it. Last year had to be quite humbling and downright brutal at times. No question. Oklahoma State was favored heavily in the game. And I know players don't necessarily think in those terms, but they were expected to win. It was expected to be a lopsided game. And it was, largely. But come on now. Don't tell me that less than 30 minutes into the season you're already getting down when you know that team's defense stinks. Yeah, they happen to force you in 3 straight 3-and-outs, but that's football. Sometimes that'll happen. Happen to be 3 in a row. Okay. You can go out there and score just as easily. But at 31-10 before halftime, to tell me the guys already started getting discouraged? Oh, boy. This could be a rough season for Oregon State.
It's on the coaches to address that mentality and keep your players up.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it is.
That's where when you read or hear something like this, that's where if you're Jonathan Smith or Tim Tibesar or any of the guys on the staff, you're like, okay.
And that's from one of your best players.
Right.
That's not talking to your backup who's getting 10 to 12 snaps out there.
Right.
Where he's going like, all right, well, I go out there and all that ends up happening is they're just picking us off. You're not talking about that guy.
Right.
You're talking about one of your best players. He's feeling it. And he's going to be here for a minute. He's not going out the door at the end of the season.
Nope.
He still has another year, at minimum. So the idea that that's something that's seeping in already, that would be extremely alarming to me if I were part of that program, if I were a fan of that program. That cannot happen this early. It can't. It simply can't. Because here's the thing. We're talking about setting up this game against Hawaii this weekend. And again, we'll talk with Stephen Tsai of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser at 5:30 and welcome him on. Hawaii is expected to win. Hawaii put up over 450 yards passing. And obviously, Oregon State secondary isn't capable of containing anybody. So if Hawaii gets up and gets up quick and gets up in bunches, which is not exactly outside the realm of possibility, what are you going to tell me? That the Beavers are going to be focusing more about going to the beach after the game? And saying, well, this is over, so... Okay. Well, what are you going to do?
I heard that Jonathan Smith opened up the defensive back competition after the game.
I would hope so.
And basically said, none of you are starters. You're all fighting for the jobs for this week.
I don't know how you can defend it otherwise.
Yeah.
How can anybody who allows that kind of performance... And look, I understand you can say there are plenty of teams that would get lit up by Tylan Wallace. I get it, okay? But you cannot tell me that you allow that kind of production. There were times, if you watched that game or you were at that game, you saw a running game where guys were going... There was no defender nearby. There wasn't anyone in the frame watching it at times. We're going like... Mercy, man. Like, it's not a matter of saying, oh, they just can't hang. They just don't have the size. They just don't have the... No, I'm talking about guys just running completely unchallenged at times. That's the stuff that's got to be incredibly discouraging to a coaching staff.
Yes.
When you're looking at the defense. But to hear it from one of your better offensive players that when it's still in the first half, that when they started scoring, our sideline started to get a little mellow. Again, I'm not expecting guys to be, jumping all up and down and crazy excited. But if anything, Jamar Jefferson has to be one of those guys that's ensuring that that doesn't happen. And I'm not putting it all on him. I'm saying that he has to be one of. Him or Jalen Moore or Jake Luton or Isaiah Hodgins or Gus Lavaca. Those are the guys who have to be leading this team. They must. Because they're the only ones who carry any credibility right now. That, to me, let's put it this way. If I'm a beat reporter, I'm covering it, I hear that from that guy, not only am I following up at length with him, that's my story of the day. You can't tell me that right now. You're less than 30 minutes into the season. You can't tell me that you're getting emotionally down that fast. It can't happen that way. You can't be that easily mentally defeated. Hey, if you're a Beavers fan, you want to chime in on this, give us a call on the Davis Roofing Hotline at 541-343-KORE. That's 541-343-5673. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. Elsewhere in Oregon State news of the day, the women's basketball program announced its schedule, non-conference schedule, that is, for the upcoming season. So the Beavers women's basketball team, which obviously was a 3 seed in last year's NCAA tournament, and certainly a lot is expected of that program, as the Ducks also have a lot expected of them. So here is the Oregon State Beavers women's basketball schedule for non-conference play. Starting with UC Irvine at home. Then they host a couple of games at Gill Coliseum as part of the preseason WNIT, which the UC Irvine game is a part of for them. Well, assuming that, first off, the second round, you already know that they're going to face either Pacific or Kansas City. It's one or the other. Probably Pacific. Pacific is also a host site, so they play Kansas City at home. In all likelihood, Pacific is coming up the road to play in Corvallis on November the 11th. On the 14th, in all likelihood, in the following game, based on the bracket for the preseason WNIT, DePaul appears to be the team most likely to come out of that side and would also be heading to Gill Coliseum to take on the Beavers in that game. The final date is November the 17th. The location is to be determined because it depends on exactly who the teams are who make it through. But the possibilities from the other side of the bracket, who Oregon State could play in a preseason WNIT championship game, would be, interestingly enough, potentially Boise State or Oklahoma. Now, obviously, most people would pick Oklahoma to be that team, but Boise State obviously has quite a bit of interest there because that game with Oregon State there in the early rounds was awfully interesting. So that could be quite the matchup and rematch on November the 17th. Again, assuming that both Oregon State gets through and assuming that either Boise State or Oklahoma get through. So much to be determined there.
Would that championship game also be at Gill Coliseum, or would that be at another site?
Again, it's to be determined because I don't know, based on the bracket, if who is considered the higher seeded team. So if it's Oklahoma, do they have to go down to Norman, or if it's Boise, and then is it obviously at Gill? I don't know yet.
Okay.
I don't know. It's to be determined. So that's your early part of the non-conference play. Then the following games. November the 21st at home against Southern Utah. November 29th and 30th, they head to Miami, Florida to take on Miami on the 29th, and then Liberty at Miami as part of a multi-team event on the 30th. They come back to Corvallis to host Hawaii on December the 6th and Utah State on November the 14th. Then the Beavers head to Maui to take on Northern Arizona and BYU on December the 18th and 19th. And then return home to play Cal State Bakersfield on the 29th. So certainly several home non-conference games for Oregon State women's basketball, with the UC Irvine, either Pacific or Kansas City in round 2, and most likely DePaul in round 3. You don't know about game 4 just yet. So that's 3. Southern Utah is the 4th home game. Hawaii, Utah State, and Cal State Bakersfield gives you 7. And again, potentially one more. You don't know about that last one in the preseason WNIT. But that is your Oregon State women's basketball non-conference schedule The conference pairings were already previously announced. They're the same as Oregon's, obviously, because everything done with travel partners. So the season starts for Oregon State women's basketball on November the 9th against UC Irvine, as I say. And of the major marquee non-conference opponents, you'd have to say the possibility of playing either Boise State or Oklahoma in the WNIT, the preseason WNIT championship game on November the 17th, whether that's at home or on the road, still to be determined, assuming that Oregon State makes it through to that. Miami certainly on the road. And then
that's really it, isn't it?
That's really it. I was going to say there's just not a lot to really hang your hat on by way of major marquee non-conference opponents. I'm trying to remember now how DePaul was last year, to be honest. I just cannot immediately recall.
I don't know.
But look, is it a loaded non-conference schedule?
No,
it's not. It's not. That said, Oregon's non-conference schedule, while more loaded, is largely, as we talked about before, on the road and neutral site. So here you have a few more, I think it's a few more home non-conference games than what the Ducks have, though not by much. I think it's pretty close. But by way of relative caliber of opponents, frankly, in those home games, it's pretty similar, to be honest with you. Because Oregon, like I say, their best opponents are all on the road or neutral site with that event in the Paradise Jam in particular. And obviously UConn being on the road in particular. So, yes, Oregon has a more daunting and appealing non-conference schedule for their women's basketball team. But many of those top-tier opponents happen to be away from Oregon.
And thanks to intern Adam, DePaul won 26 games last year, went 26-8 and won the Big East.
Right. So
so that would be a really good.
That actually is a pretty good one. I thought that was pretty solid. So good work there with the quick research. So yes, I thought DePaul was pretty good, and I knew they were a host school, but I could not immediately recall, certainly by way of records. So there you go. So that's a pretty solid one. So you're again home and season opener November the 9th. Then you've got Pacific or Kansas City on the 11th. Most likely DePaul, which could be, frankly, your best non-conference home game on November the 14th. All wrapping up December the 29th, Cal State Bakersfield, and then getting into conference play. So that's your Oregon State women's basketball non-conference schedule. Check that out. I'm sure if you want to get a full schedule and look into tickets online. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene.
This is the James Crepea Show.
We've got a blind date with destiny.
And it looks like she's ordered the lobster.
Oregonian columnist James Crepea.
I had some crackpot dynamite reporter at the first press conference ask me how in the heck we're going to possibly throw the ball when they keep a lid on their covers and who's the best pass rusher you've ever played against.
We're not the favorites. We're the other guys.
KORE 1050 and 95.7. Fox Sports Eugene. Here is the James Crepea Show, presented by Dairy Mart.
And we now welcome to the program friend, former competing beat reporter many moons ago, covers the Green Bay Packers for the Green Bay Press-Gazette and USA Today Sports Network, Mr. Ryan Wood. Ryan, welcome to the program, my man.
Hey, thanks for having me, James. How's the West Coast treating you?
Pretty damn good, man. Pretty good. I would say about as well as the Midwest is treating you, but I'd say actually probably even better.
So yes, it is.
It's going
It is
well.
the West Coast. I could see that.
Yes, I know you're usually eager to come to the West Coast for various different trips. You're more focused on the off the field excursions you get to take as part of being an NFL beat reporter than you are the games.
Yes, that is always so the Packers go to L.A. this year, and I'm looking forward to it. It's not about the Chargers. I'm just looking forward to going to L.A., so you would be correct.
Yeah. Well, the Packers open the NFL season against the Chicago Bears on Thursday night. You certainly get that opportunity in that division to see them quite a bit. You're in downtown Chicago right now. So let's start with overarchingly for fans certainly out here who are not as familiar with the Packers and the various comings and goings of the offseason. Packers have a new head coach, Matt LaFleur. Know that you spent some time getting to know him, his family, traveled to Michigan to get to his hometown, et cetera, et cetera. Did a big piece on him. For people going to be watching this on Thursday night on NBC here on the West Coast, who the heck is Matt LaFleur, and who's going to be coaching the Green Bay Packers? Tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's got that billing as the offensive whiz kid. You know, the best place to be as a young coach right now is to say that you've rubbed shoulders and are friends with Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and he's coached under both of those guys. So there's no question that he was hired because of the scheme, because of what he can do for this offense. And we haven't seen any of it yet. Aaron Rodgers did not play at all in the preseason, not a huge surprise. So whatever we see tomorrow night is literally going to be our very first eyes on this offense and the scheme that he was brought here to implement. So it's really fascinating just how much unknown there is on the eve of the opener. And it's going to be interesting to see how quickly this quarterback and this coach can obviously gel and kind of get over what has been some sluggish years the past couple of years here for Green Bay's offense.
What has that dynamic been like since you're not seeing it on the field? I know you can't answer from that context, but obviously there's a lot read into with Aaron Rodgers and McCarthy last year, a lot read into remarks that one would say or the other would say and the ongoings of their relationship that obviously dissolved quite poorly. What has been the dynamic from what you've been able to see and tell between LaFleur and Rodgers from what you hear from both of these guys? Is there a noticeable difference in Aaron Rodgers and how he speaks of LaFleur by way of comparison to how he was starting to speak of McCarthy towards the end?
You know, I think there's a feeling out process, just like any relationship in life, really. When it's a new relationship, there's a feeling out process, and that's what this offseason's been. Reality is these two don't know how it's going to work out either. I mean, they're embarking on this thing. They're just starting this thing out. So, you know, the honeymoon phase, if you will, there's some of that for sure. But if it all goes back, I mean, this is a competitive business, and you know this. If they win, things will be hunky-dory. When Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy were winning, there was no issue. They were winning. It wasn't until they started losing that things really got off the rails. And if it's a tough September, and you look at the Packers' schedule, their first 6 games are all against good defenses. Now, they have a good bit of those at home, and they're fortunate to have that. But it gets a little easier after night game at Chicago, probably the best defense in the league, but not all that much easier. I mean, there's no grace period for this new offense that's implementing itself for the first time. There's going to be growing pains, but they've got to get over those pretty quickly because of who they play. If it goes south, then it could get sour. You know, at the end of the day, it's going to be what happens on the field, and in large part that dictates the relationship. I think it's been a feeling out process, and both guys want to make this work. They understand that it's in their best interest for both of them to make this work, and there's been a lot of collaboration, some compromise, give and take on both sides.
Have they spoken of Ryan, and we're chatting with Ryan Wood of the Green Bay Press-Gazette. You can follow him on Twitter at @ByRyanWood, by as in byline, not by as in B-U-Y. As I have many times in relation to Ryan buying things that he owes me over the years.
Yeah, this makes up for the carton of cigarettes, right? It's worked into the contract?
Or whatever else may come along the way. Yeah. So with Rodgers and LaFleur, have they spoken of how this dynamic is going to work by way of the end game? Is there going to be, like years ago when Manning was with the Colts, he would get 3 plays pre-snap, and then based on what he saw, would make a determination. Have they talked about how the in-game mechanisms are going to work with these two as far as is LaFleur going to be giving Rodgers options? How much freedom and flexibility does Rodgers have? I would imagine quite a bit. So that's why I'm asking exactly how massive is the chasm here, and how wide is the playbook open for him at the line of scrimmage? Because at times you were hearing at the end that Rodgers was basically calling that offense under McCarthy. So how much does LaFleur have by way of control, and how much control does he give to Rodgers?
You know, the one thing that, and obviously the word audible has been a hot topic this offseason in Green Bay. The one thing that Matt LaFleur said yesterday is that they have, yes, he's got the green light to make audibles, because frankly, it'd be dumb if he didn't. I mean, every quarterback in the NFL makes audibles at the line of scrimmage because play calling is based on a projection of what the defense is supposed to look like. And if it doesn't look like that and you run the play into a bad look, you're asking for problems. So it's not, I mean, he's going to make audibles. And Matt LaFleur said that they've talked through every scenario of what an audible could be. We don't know how large the menu is. Historically, this is not an offense that has had a lot of audibles, but historically, this is not a scheme that has had an Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. I mean, you trace the origins of this scheme, it really goes back to the 90s and the West Coast offense that Mike Shanahan implemented in Denver, and you can make a very good argument. Look, Kyle Shanahan, when he was the offensive coordinator in Atlanta back in 2015, Matt Ryan was an MVP. But even still, Matt Ryan did not do the things pre-snap that Aaron Rodgers is capable of doing. You can make a very good argument that since John Elway in the 90s, there's not been a quarterback of this caliber in this system. So it's unprecedented from that end, too. It's something Rodgers isn't used to, but the system really hasn't had this either. And that's where I think both sides are willing to make the compromise in terms of utilizing one of the things that Aaron Rodgers does best, which is being able to read a defense at the line of scrimmage and get the offense out of bad plays if the look isn't there. So, Matt LaFleur said that basically there shouldn't be any surprises. He doesn't anticipate any surprises. If there's an audible, he understands what that might go to. We don't know how large the menu is and how many plays Aaron Rodgers can audible into, but it's something that they've discussed thoroughly, and it's something that really shouldn't be the issue. I think the key for this offense, it's going to be how quickly they break the huddle, which sounds like a really mundane thing. I mean, it's not exciting to talk on radio about how quickly an offense breaks the huddle, but it's really important for this offense because before the snap, there's a lot of pre-snap motions. It's one of the things that this offense is really built on is the ability to use motion before the snap to dictate matchups and to get the defense to reveal itself. Well, if you throw an audible into the middle of that, you change the play, it takes time. Obviously, I mean, it's simple math, and you have to allow yourself enough time to do, as busy as they are before the snap, to do all those things. So that's going to be key, is how much time they give themselves, how efficiently do they break the huddle, the communication system, something they didn't get to really practice at all in the preseason. But this is an offense that's going to be built into having the ability to audible at the line of scrimmage from the quarterback, and it's something that the quarterback and the coach have talked about a lot.
I can imagine because, again, it was such an issue in particular at the end of last season. With the skill positions on offense, Ryan, there's going to be some new names. Some of these guys are new names in this Packers offense. You got Jimmy Graham at tight end. Devontae Adams obviously is a returning guy. Marquez Valdez-Scantling on the depth chart to start at receiver. But the rest of that receiver core, these are not household names by any stretch of the imagination. So, again, this is a standalone Thursday night game to open the NFL season. Tell us a little bit about some of these guys down the depth chart in particular that Aaron Rodgers is going to be throwing to, who most folks are going to be learning about for the first time.
Yeah, so if you haven't done your fantasy draft yet and you're looking for a tight end literally at the end of the draft, Robert Tonyan is a name to maybe keep in mind. He's a guy that he had the best camp of the tight end group, and that's a tight end group, as you said, that has Jimmy Graham. He had a better camp than Jimmy Graham. Now, Jimmy Graham, you would imagine, is going to be a pretty big part of this offense, but Robert Tonyan, if Jimmy Graham's 1A, Robert Tonyan is probably 1B. I mean, he's going to play a lot. He's going to get quite a bit of snaps, and the quarterback trusts him, so he's going to get passes when he's open. So that's a guy to keep in mind. The other guy, slot receiver Geronimo Allison, he would have had a big year last year, but he went on IR after 5 games. You look at his numbers, he was on his way to having a pretty decent 800-yard season in just his second or third season. He's a young guy. So he's a guy that, he's exclusively in the slot. He's a big receiver, really long, good leverage, not the fastest guy, kind of an interesting fit for the slot considering he's not one of those short water bug type guys, not a speedster. But the Packers like to have length in the middle of the field, and he gives them that. And again, another guy that has the quarterback's trust. So this, if you go back to 2011 when the Packers were torching the NFL on fire, they had 15-1 record, setting all kinds of offensive records. They had a receiving core that had a heck of a pedigree. I mean, this was Jordy Nelson in his prime. Donald Driver was still there. Greg Jennings, Jermichael Finley at tight end. Randall Cobb was a rookie that season. This receiving core is not that receiving core. It's nowhere near the pedigree. But there are some guys here that have talent. There are some guys here that are really young, need to develop this season. But the quarterback has spoken well of this receiving core, and we'll see how that kind of all fits together on the field.
One of the big changes on defense for the Packers, obviously being the departure of Clay Matthews, and both mainly from a leadership perspective, I would think more than anything now, because obviously he's in the twilight of his career, so production was not necessarily the main focus anymore. He's moved on to the Rams. The Packers have moved on at linebacker. Who is taking on either, especially that leadership role on that defense, Ryan? Is it Preston Smith? Is it Orrin Brooks? Is it my guy, Montravius Adams? Who is it in that front seven in particular who is taking on that bigger leadership role that Clay Matthews clearly played?
The guy on that defense is going to be Kenny Clark. And the question with Kenny Clark, he's nose tackle, is he had 6.5 sacks last year, missed a couple games with injury, had an outside chance of flirting with double-digit sacks last year as a 22-year-old. He's 23 now. The question is, can he be a Pro Bowler? I mean, he's got that kind of talent now. In the NFC, interior defensive line is loaded in this conference. Aaron Donald is kind of good, and Fletcher Cox and Akeem Hicks. And there's a lot of talent at that position in this conference. But Kenny Clark is a guy. He's not Aaron Donald. No one's Aaron Donald. But he's a guy that right below that tier behind him, he's there, and he's an anchor for this defense. He's a reason why the Packers were so willing and comfortable with parting with Mike Daniels, who was a Pro Bowler 2 years ago before camp. So it starts with Kenny Clark, and they brought in Zadarius Smith at 4 years, $66 million. They brought in Preston Smith at 4 years, $54 million, to be dudes on that edge rush. I mean, that was a huge weakness for this defense a year ago. Clay Matthews and Nick Perry, who are both now gone, didn't have any production there. They've needed to fix that. They probably overspent a little bit in free agency, but they brought in two guys in the Smiths that are going to be starters right off the bat. They're young. They've been durable. The best football that they play should be ahead of them. So they've kind of projected these guys to be stalwarts here, and they need to go out and do that. If they're able to, you got Kenny Clark providing that interior rush, got the Smiths on the outside. We'll see how quickly rookie Rashawn Gary, the 12th overall pick, comes along. He's got all the talent physically in the world, but he's moving to a new position, standing up for the first time. He was a guy that put his hand in the ground, played a lot of 5-tech at Michigan when he was in college. So if they are able to build this pass rush up, it would go a long way, because it's probably the biggest hole they had on the roster last year.
Couple of last things for you, Ryan. We're chatting with Ryan Wood of the Green Bay Press-Gazette. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at @ByRyanWood. A lot of folks in breaking down that NFC North division, Ryan, have talked about how this might be the most competitive division in the NFL from top to bottom, by way of there are a lot of folks who expect the Packers, who obviously went 6-9-1 last year, or the Lions, who went 6-10, to be better. And there are very few people who think that the Bears, who won the division at 12-4, are going to be markedly worse. They may take a little bit back, but not, fall off a cliff bad. And the Vikings are right there at 8-7-1. So how do you see this division in particular, and where the Packers fit into it heading into this season?
It is close. I mean, I don't think there's any question that this division is extremely competitive. The benefit and the advantage that the Packers are always going to have, especially if he stays healthy, which he was not last year. Aaron Rodgers last year basically played 16 games on a broken bone in his knee. If he stays healthy, the advantage that the Packers have is that they have Aaron Rodgers, and that's a heck of an advantage for any team to have. He's at an age, turns 36 in December. That's not as old, though, as 36 used to be. You look around the league, quarterbacks are playing so much longer than they ever have. Tom Brady is about, 85? I mean, he just never ages. So that's kind of how the league has gone. If he's healthy, if all things are equal, it's a heck of a tiebreaker to have. But I agree. It's hard to see it with Mitch Trubisky. He still has yet to show that he can be a franchise guy, but he wasn't that last year, and the Bears were really, really good because that defense, led by Khalil Mack, a future Hall of Famer, is probably the best in the league. The Vikings defense, not that much behind them. They're probably a top 5, at least top 10 defense, and they've got Kirk Cousins and Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, a really good skill group around them. So, yeah, I've been telling people this since I've been on the beat in 2014. This is by far the widest variance of possible outcomes going into a season that I've thought the Packers had. I mean, things could go really, really bad, and it's possible. If they went 6-10, I wouldn't be surprised. Or things could go really good. Aaron Rodgers could get red hot, as he's been known to do, and this is a team that can go 11-5, even 12-4, and just really things click really well. I mean, it's literally that wide open. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens on the field, because the 3 words that I've said, a lot of people around here have said all off season is I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be really interesting to find out.
Yeah, for sure. And as somebody who has Aaron Rodgers on his fantasy team, and it's the only fantasy team I have in the football realm, yes, I'm quite vested in the interest of Aaron Rodgers and how he performs. We'll get you out of here on this, Ryan. How do you see this matchup with the Bears tomorrow night? Like I say, it's a standalone game, NBC. Most folks out here will be watching. It'll be 5:20 Pacific time, so right after work, you get to open the NFL season, Packers-Bears. One of the great historic rivalries in the NFL. How do you see this one playing out?
It's hard to see the Packers coming in and winning. I got the Bears 20-16. It's probably going to be an ugly game frankly for both teams. I mean, just so little's done in the preseason anymore that these openers are almost an extension of that. But from the Packers' perspective, you're going in to an environment that is a road game at night, and as you know, that's a thing. I mean, road at night is the hardest environment to play in, against probably the best defense in the NFL. So much talent on that side of the ball, with a first-time defensive coordinator, Chuck Pagano, who's been a very good defensive coordinator in this league, and you're unveiling an offense for the first time. And there's got to be some type of growing pains. I don't care who your quarterback is. I don't care how good the system is. When you're doing it for the first time, you're not going to be as good now as you are week 10, week 11. So it's just such a tall order. I mean, on the spectrum, like, I'm sure the Packers would much prefer opening at home against the Oakland Raiders. This is like the opposite of that. This is about as tough as a test that they can get. And so because of that, I got the Bears 20-16.
Appreciate you, Ryan. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Enjoy downtown Chicago.
All right, take care. Anytime.
You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. Elsewhere, some news around the NFL world, and certainly of interest to our audience, given that we are a Raiders affiliate. Antonio Brown fined $54,000 today by the Raiders for various different absences during the course of camp. And he had tweeted out or sent that on Instagram, whichever it was, a photo of the letter that he received from Mike Mayock, the Raiders general manager, outlining the fines that were being imposed on him. And he had, on that photo, said, "When your own team want to hate, but there's no stopping me now. Devil is a lie. Everyone got to pay this year, so we clear." Okay. And mainly one of the fines due to the absence that Mayock obviously addressed, as you saw on the Hard Knocks program, the day that he had said that Brown either has to be all in or all out. Well, that day cost Antonio Brown $40,000. Then in the other part of the Antonio Brown saga that has captivated or bored to death, depending on your perspective of the nonsense of it all, the helmet issue. Well, he has apparently determined what his new helmet will be. It will be the Zenith Shadow helmet that he will wear. And apparently he believes it'll make him feel more agile and comfortable while allowing for better visibility.
So he got an endorsement, basically.
I was going to say, by the way, that was also announced by Zenith.
Yeah.
So I would say that the $54,000 fine that the Raiders slapped on Antonio Brown may very well be paid by the endorsement that he received for the new helmet that he is wearing. I would think they may have paid him even more handsomely than that. So, but I would imagine a portion of the proceeds will be heading to the Oakland Raiders directly after the ridiculousness that was the offseason with him, and first with the feet, which is a more serious issue and legitimate. Though, again, I still question why you would want to go to one of those places in a not your native country. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that, but okay, he did. But the helmet issue was absolutely ridiculous. Well, yeah, okay. So we can now I think we're totally past the helmet. We can now jump the shark on the helmet. The helmet's over. So if you were waiting to know exactly what helmet Antonio Brown was wearing, well, now you know. He has managed to find a new model. If you were waiting to draft your fantasy team and you needed to know, but will he play? Has he found one? Well, lo and behold, yes. Yes, he has. He has found a new helmet. So we can stop talking about the damn helmet, which every other NFL player managed to figure out and deal with and not cause into a cause célèbre. So thankfully that is all over with. But yes, he was fined $54,000. Elsewhere, as we heard shortly before the show, that the Colts apparently have confirmed that Jim Irsay turned down a offer of $3.2 billion to buy the Colts.
That's billion with a Dr. Evil billion.
Yeah. So the offer, which was reported by the Indy Star, confirmed by the team, was nearly $1 billion more than the $2.3 billion that the Carolina Panthers sold for last year, and more than double what the Bills sold for in 2014. So the Colts allegedly, and not allegedly as in allegedly on the report, allegedly based on the team saying that they turned it down, but that Irsay turned down an offer of $3.2 billion that the franchise is not for sale. On Wednesday, Forbes.com also happened to release its annual estimated values of all NFL teams and said that the Colts were 20th in the league, and the Forbes ranking had them at $2.65 billion, which is up 11% from last year. And that the Panthers were $2.4 billion, and the Bills were dead last at $1.9 billion. So,
boo-hoo.
Yeah. Now, the top of that list, I was going to say the top of the list, understandably, and for anybody who made it to Dallas, you perfectly understand why. The Dallas Cowboys at $5.5 billion.
Do you have the whole list?
I could probably pull it up real quick, but bottom line, the Cowboys are number one at $5.5 billion. New England Patriots at $4.1 billion, and the Giants are third at $3.9 billion. But again, allegedly, the Colts turned down $3.2 billion. Yeah, so I'm looking at the list now. So again, top of the list, as we all know, the Cowboys, as they have for many, many years. Pats, Giants, L.A. Rams, interestingly enough.
Oh, yeah.
Viewed at fourth.
Because of the new stadium.
Yeah, but it's not built yet.
No, but it's still owned by the...
I understand.
It's not public money, or not a lot of public money.
I know, but nevertheless.
Yeah.
It's... Their operating income is $30 million. Okay? Next on the list, the San Francisco 49ers, who are only $300 million behind, but their operating income was $93 million. So that's why I say it's somewhat interesting, just because the stadium's not done yet. That's all. I'm not saying that the Rams shouldn't be valued. Of course, they're in Los Angeles. It's just they're not in a full stadium yet. It's still under construction is all. Bears at 6th. Redskins, interestingly enough, down at 7th. For a long time, they were like 1 and 2 with the Cowboys, just because of the way that they're structured and ownership and stuff. But I know they have an old building and blah, blah, blah. Bottom line, they also make $120 million in operating income. The New York Jets are 8th. 9th are the Texans. 10th the Eagles. The Raiders come in at 12th, interestingly enough, and I'd be curious to see what that turns into when they complete the move to Las Vegas. I would imagine that number may move up just a tad. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's some of your news from around the NFL realm, as I say. And coming up, we will have on Stephen Tsai of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser, covers Hawaii, to give us an idea of the Warriors heading into this weekend's game against Oregon State. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. We now welcome on via the Davis Roofing Hotline, Stephen Tsai of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. You can follow him on Twitter at Stephen Tsai. That's Stephen with a PH and Tsai with a TSAI. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you doing? And it's kind of appropriate sponsorship because I'm calling from the Host Star Advertiser's roof. So I'm not really sure the code to get back into the building, so that might be a problem. If anyone knows of a guy, with a really long ladder, I might be.
Well, if it's time for a no roof, we got a guy for you.
We can send him over first class.
That's right.
Well, let's start with obviously what was quite the season opener that I'm sure Hawaii is still riding high off of, to say the least, in that week 0 win over Arizona. How have they handled it in what is now the nearly 10-plus days since? I'm sure there's been a lot of excitement around Hawaii, but around the program, how have the players and coaches handled it as they have to prepare for Oregon State?
Well, it made a star of a defensive lineman nicknamed Kumbo Williams, who got his nickname from the Lion King, and he's the guy who ran 35 yards to chase down Khalil Tate at the end. And so apparently that video clip was used by a bunch of different teams like Clemson, Georgia, 49ers, Buffalo Bills, to inspire their linemen to keep playing hard to whistle. And so I guess Kumbo Williams is a household name, well, at least in Williams' household.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. That play in particular certainly got showed a lot of places. There was a lot of highlights in that game in particular, but certainly that last play, you're absolutely right. Hawaii's defense made just a heck of a play at the end, even though the yardage in the game in and of itself was a ton. the last play,
which should probably be the same the yardage coming into this week's game, because I think both teams have a little bit of leaky defenses,
to say the least. Let's start with the Hawaii offense, though. They put up very nearly 600 yards of total offense, and obviously always a potent passing attack, but 436 yards passing, 378 from Cole McDonald. What does this passing game bring to the table? Because clearly there's a lot of weapons, but Cedric Byrd, 14 catches, 224, and 4 touchdowns in that opener against Arizona. Quite the tandem that they have with McDonald to Byrd.
Right. So what they did is they have a guy named John Ursula who was brought back. He decided to give up his senior year and apply for the NFL draft. He's now with the Seahawks. And Byrd was playing the left slot in their 4-wide offense, and he moved over to the right side, John Ursula's spot, and that put Hawaii's two fastest players, JoJo Ward and Cedric Byrd, on the same side. And Hawaii does a lot of different things with them. They'll try to have guys rub off defenders with, I guess that's a term for picks, that they try to rub guys off with the different routes to free people up. And just having those two guys on the same side creates a lot of open lanes for each other and also for the guys on the left side. And I think Bird's really benefited from it. And Bird's one of the fastest players on the team. And with that many guys, hitting the lanes, passing lanes, Hawaii's offense is pretty explosive.
With McDonald, again, we certainly saw a ton of passing yards, 4 touchdowns, also had 4 interceptions. That's why the game was so compelling and competitive.
People catch his passes. That's the thing about Cole.
Yeah.
So it's not always the guys in the same uniform as him, but he's pretty accurate to somebody.
Yeah. What have they said in the time thereafter, in the post game and the nearly 2 weeks since? What's been said about how they're going to go about correcting some of those mistakes? Because, it's one hand to put up a ton of yards and several touchdowns. It's another to have 4 interceptions along the way as well.
Right. I think the problem with McDonald is when he's in system, when he's doing what he's supposed to do, he's very accurate, and he's also a big threat as a runner. But he said he got out of system 6 times trying to make things happen. He's got a little Brett Favre, and then he tries to sometimes throw 2 perfect passes. So I'd be too perfect in the windows and get him in trouble. And but he says, he's not afraid to throw interceptions because he knows he can come back and throw touchdowns the next time. So he's a guy who's very confident in his abilities, and that's kind of how he's approached the past week. He said he's just going to still be himself, but try to stay a little bit more in the system and not try to freelance too much.
That Hawaii defense allowed over 500 yards of offense as well and 361 passing. can the Hawaii defense contain an Oregon State offense that has an Isaiah Hodgins, who certainly is quite capable as a receiver, and a Jamar Jefferson, who's a capable running back? But let's start with Hodgins in the passing game that Oregon State has. Can this defense that gave up 361 to Arizona contain Jake Luton to Isaiah Hodgins?
Well, they've had to really redirect their attack for this week. Last week, Khalil Tate is such a threat as a runner that they have a safety spy on him the whole game. And now that Oregon State has more of a traditional offense, I think you're going to go back to the regular type of defense. And it's going to be a challenge. They're beat up. They've got some guys are questionable for the game, particularly linebackers. So it should be kind of an interesting battle. They had difficulty stopping people when they were fully healthy, and now they're not really fully healthy. So you see a lot of freshmen and transfers get into the game this week.
The run game, as you mentioned, Khalil Tate had over 100 yards. J.J. Taylor had 67 yards rushing in that one. Arizona's total at 178. Oregon State is going to be looking to emphasize its run game and get back to it as long as it's competitive, and if it ever gets ahead, that's certainly going to be what they look to pound the rock with Jamar Jefferson. You mentioned some of these freshman linebackers who are going to have to play. How much of a concern is the Hawaii rush defense right now?
I think that's a pretty big concern because while the freshmen are, they're very high on them. They think they're going to be okay. They just haven't had a lot of game experience, and it's going to be tough, especially since they're very familiar with Oregon State's offensive line. Two guys that actually committed to Hawaii but are now playing for Oregon State or starting for Oregon State, and so I think Hawaii's just a little bit concerned about Oregon State's running game and in their offensive line, and as well as quarterback who's a 6-year guy who just knows how to read defenses with his play actions and other things.
There's certainly a lot made heading into this game, going back to the recruiting materials, back and forth exchange between the programs. How much has that gained traction and is still a talking point out in Honolulu, out in Hawaii? Is that something that is really drawing attention of fans and whatnot out there, or is that really just something that is more of interest in the mainland to Oregon State and to fans out here?
Well, you've got to understand that Rolovich is a very unique coach. When he was the coordinator, when he was the offensive coordinator and the quarterbacks coach before, he used to have the quarterback meetings in the room on the road in jacuzzis. So he's just a unique guy. He stages water balloon fights between players. He does all different types of things that are pretty crazy, and so he didn't need any more motivation. And then Oregon State, whether it was inadvertent or not, sent recruiting material to the university, and he kind of used and played that up. I'm not really sure if he was mad about it or he just thought it'd be great to kind of tweak at Oregon State a little bit, but he's had fun with it, and now he says he's really more focused on the game, and so I don't think there's as much using his bulletin board material as there's that for this game.
One thing that has drawn quite a bit of ire out here is certainly the broadcast and the ability to watch this game, and a lot of commentary being said about it because everybody, it's the much maligned Pac-12 network for folks in this part of the country, and the carriage and the ability to watch it or not. This game drawing even more criticism in the West Coast because it's being carried via Facebook Live, and you're not able to watch it via traditional television broadcast, and there's questions as to why. Can you give us some insight, Stephen, as to the back end?
And how does it work? Do you have to send a friend request to watch the game, or you have to get like a certain amount of times, or
no?
Or
so
put
it's
your status as complicated, or
that might be everybody's feeling with the Pac-12 network in particular. But no, it should be. I'm not sure if it's being done through the Hawaii Athletics page or whatnot. I haven't looked into it myself because I'm going to be kind of occupied on Saturday with an Oregon game myself. But I would imagine that it's either being done just through the Facebook interface. If you just go to facebook.com/live, I think generally speaking is one of them, or if it's through the Hawaii Athletics page or whatnot. There's obviously a way to get to it fairly seamlessly, and through mobile devices and the like. But nevertheless, to then bounce that up into a big screen TV or something, whether you're at home or at a sports bar, it gets a little bit more complicated. to do it that way as opposed. I know all the things are modern now or whatever, but still, it's a little bit more involved compared to just being able to turn on the television channel and with all the various networks that are out there. So do you have some insight into the back end of things from the Hawaii perspective into what this looks like and why it's being done in this way, either by Hawaii or the Mountain West? And you were mentioning when we were chatting off air that this is even worse, frankly, for fans in Hawaii because they don't even have the ability to watch it via Facebook Live. So for what exactly is the goings-on with this television broadcast of this game?
Well, I think the Mountain West wanted to expand the way it shows games. I think they did some things on YouTube channels, and this is one of the latest things of trying to reach a different type of an audience. And the way the split works with Hawaii in the league is Hawaii gets $2.3 million a year from Spectrum for its pay-per-view rights. And those are all the home games or road games that aren't shown on national TV. You have to watch or order through pay-per-view. And so Hawaii gets to keep the money they get from Spectrum, but in turn they're not allowed to share in the national money that the Mountain West receives. So to accommodate Hawaii, every time one of the games is on pay-per-view in Hawaii, they work out a way to show it to people on the mainland for free, either through the internet or I guess through Facebook now, but block it in Hawaii. And so it's kind of a complicated thing. They're just trying to avoid having people, sort of protect the pay-per-view rights. But it's made difficult for a lot of people who follow Hawaii, from the mainland to try to follow their games too, because sometimes the way the feed works doesn't work, and it's kind of a complicated mess. And as hard as it is for Hawaii fans, I'm sure it's going to be difficult or complicated for Oregon State fans too.
Yeah, to hear about the Spectrum Sports pay-per-view set up for people in Hawaii to try and watch the home game, that is just crazy. And to hear about this geo-blocking premise of, so it's on Facebook Live everywhere in the world except in Hawaii, yet the game is being played.
I'm not even sure how they block it, and they've had some problems where people have been able to use, I guess, mainland telephone numbers and, bounce the feed back, and I don't know how they do it, but it's really complicated. And a lot of it just goes back to the television contract and Hawaii's need for pay-per-view money to offset cost there to help the program.
We'll get you out of the air on this, Stephen, and I appreciate the time. We're chatting with Stephen Tsai.
Oh, you're going to send the ladder up? Is that how you get me out?
We'll get you. We'll lower you down. We're chatting with Stephen Tsai of the Honolulu Star Advertiser, covers Hawaii. What would it mean, Stephen, to the Hawaii program if it were able to win, and it is the favorite in this game? What would it mean to them if they are able to win back-to-back games against Pac-12 teams at home?
Well, it puts them in the race for the Pac-12 title, because that's the week after they go to Washington. So I think that's what they're going for. They want the Pac-12 title.
Does that put them in the lead in the Pac-12 South?
It might, because they are the most southern team. But yeah, they're having problems winning the Mountain West. So they thought, maybe they can win the Pac-12.
Man.
Appreciate the time, Stephen. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Bye.
That was Stephen Tsai of the Honolulu Star Advertiser. Pretty amusing guest. You're listening to the James Crepea Show here on Fox Sports Eugene. Thank our guests, Ryan Wood of the Green Bay Press-Gazette and Stephen Tsai of the Honolulu Star Advertiser for joining us, giving us some insight into the NFL opening game tomorrow night between the Packers and Bears, and then obviously the Oregon State-Hawaii game on Saturday. Some other news from the college football world and news and notes. Fresno State has indeed added former Washington quarterback who immediately transferred upon losing the quarterback competition, Jake Haener. Well, yes, as expected, he has indeed transferred to Fresno State and joined the program. He enrolled on Tuesday, joined the team. He will have to sit out the 2019 season, and he will have 2 years of eligibility remaining. Fresno State's quarterback, as it stands, is a senior So the thought process being that by sitting out this year, he will be the de facto favorite to be the starter in 2020. And then who knows about 2021 and what may happen thereafter. But at least for 2020, that Jake Haener is going into a situation where he may possibly, could be, should be, would be the favorite until Fresno State goes out and signs, a junior college transfer. And then
has a competition just like, was it Miami?
Washington in this case. I know it's hard to keep track because of the...
No. I mean, like transfer goes to another school like Miami,
like
and then,
Miami,
loses the starting job after transferring.
Right. That would be the other one. Yeah, the Martell ordeal. So, yes. So, in this case, Haener goes from Washington to Fresno State. He's got to have to sit out, but nevertheless, he is the presumptive, at the moment, favorite to take over for their senior quarterback after this season. Elsewhere in college football, Notre Dame running back Jafar Armstrong out for at least a month, possibly 2 months, with a groin / kind of abdominal injury that he suffered in the season opener against Louisville. So that's certainly a blow to the Irish running back core. So that is not good for one of the top 10 teams in the country, to say the least. Tennessee saw a couple of reserve players who were, and I do want to stress, these guys were considerably down the depth chart. So this is not like, they just lost to Georgia State and they just lost a bunch of guys. No. These guys were down the depth chart, but nevertheless, Tennessee did just lose 2 players who left the program. One of them, interestingly enough, tweeted out. So, after the loss to Georgia State, there was several tweets obviously out there that gained a lot of traction of poking fun at Tennessee for paying $900-something $1,000 to then lose to Georgia State. And I'd seen a couple of them. They were quite amusing, I must say. Well, apparently one of these guys on Sunday retweeted that.
Oh.
And he's since deleted it, but he's left the program.
Yeah.
He's no longer a Vol for life, to say the least. Elsewhere on Twitter, and I saw this earlier today, and this has come up a couple of times in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And this is where sometimes when people reference the lunacy of the South in relation to football, this is just something that you don't see on the West Coast. This is not saying good, bad, or otherwise, okay?
Okay.
I'm just saying in reference to the culture of college football and football in the day-to-day life, okay?
Okay.
A truck, rather large truck. Imagine a truck if you see sometimes at the gas station or a 7-Eleven or something, and it gets a delivery of beer or soda or something like that, one of those size trucks.
Not a full semi, but just about in between.
Just, one of those, like I say.
Okay.
Pick your favorite beer brand, making a delivery at the convenience store.
Okay.
That size kind of truck. Driving around Atlanta, showing on it, it's the full side and back is nothing but LED screens. And they are showing the Tennessee Georgia State game.
Oh.
Now, again, Georgia State is in Atlanta. So this does make a lot of sense, except I can assure you they're doing this as much for Georgia State as they are to poke fun at Tennessee because of the rivalry with Georgia. So this is just peak.
Yeah, it had to be a Georgia donor.
Either Georgia or Georgia State, whichever. But this is amusing as all hell. So just imagine driving through downtown.
So the entire side of it is one big TV screen showing a replay of the game.
Yes, you can see it here. This is exactly what it is. The entire side of this box truck is showing the game. And the back of it is showing the game.
How many accidents happened for following that truck too closely?
Oh, and again, they've done stuff. So it was about a year or so ago. There was a pickup truck that went around the interstate, the Beltway interstate around Atlanta, with a TV strapped behind it, showing. And I'm forgetting which game. Forgive me. I can't remember if it was a Georgia game or whichever. Okay, but they were showing a game. Okay. So they would just all they did all day was drive around Atlanta with a television on the back of this on the back of a pickup truck, just showing the game on loop.
Oh man,
that's the level of commitment and lunacy to sport and mainly football in that region. Like I say, it's just different. I'm not make your own judgment as to whether or not you think that's good, bad, healthy, or otherwise.
So what you're saying
I'm just telling you it's different, man.
So what you're saying is you need somebody around here for like one of those Bigfoot beverage trucks or one of the beer trucks to start putting the LEDs on the side, and
so for instance,
anybody who beats the Huskies, they put that game on.
If
and
nothing
drive
but
around
through
with it.
South Central Los Angeles all day Saturday and Sunday, there was somebody just driving around showing highlights of Cincinnati pummeling the UCLA offense.
Now drive that around Westwood, around the campus.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say if you did it on the other side of town.
Yeah.
But that's the point. But that would be the analogous thing. Or, for instance, let's just go ahead and assume on Sunday that the favorites hold, okay? So let's assume that happens. If a rather large truck was driving around Eugene and Corvallis and Portland that just happened to be displaying Oregon State losing to Hawaii, should that happen, assuming that the favorites hold? That would be an example. That would be an analogous situation.
That would just be mean, though.
That's just the South. I'm just telling you. That's how these people roll. It's a different deal down there. It's fun, man. It's fun. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's show. We certainly did. Tomorrow's guest will be Chris Murray of the Nevada Sports Net, and Sean Keeler covers Colorado. You've been listening to the James Crepea Show.